Welcome back to the channel. This will be the best team for Matchday 17 in UCL Fantasy, combining the Wildcard and the Limitless into one, and essentially both chips are the exact same right now. If you still have one of those boosters, you should probably use it, but the bench is completely irrelevant now because we can't make substitutions or change the captaincy in the final for Matchday 17, and I will be going live next Saturday for that final around 2 hours before kickoff, and that's when we can lock in our teams. I'll answer your questions and we can end this season as strongly as possible, win our mini leagues, and also get to the ranks that we want to. And also check out my team selection video where I'll discuss my transfer plans. With only 5 available transfers, I'll be looking to bolster my squad and try to match what I talk about in this video for the best team for Matchday 17. If you want to see Club World Cup fantasy content, then let me know down the comment section below, and also like this video. Let's get it to over 150 likes, and also subscribe to the channel, share the video and all that good stuff. It all really boosts us up in the algorithm and supports the channel even further. And check out the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, UCL Fantasy League and Spotify can also be found in the description, and you can also see the code on screen right now, cCaFxb, and for next season you'll be able to actually join automatically if you already are a part of that mini league. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Matchday 17 is its own entity because you can't make substitutions or change the captaincy as discussed before, and in terms of budget, it really isn't an issue. Everybody watching can afford this 15-man squad, even those that are playing UCL Fantasy right now and making a team for Matchday 17 and you're joining really late, you can still get every single one of these players, and it's all about that starting 11 now. The substitutions are completely irrelevant, but I always encourage you to check out my how to play guide because every single stage of the competition is broken down into detail. But in terms of budget, that's more of an issue in the earlier rounds of this competition, like the league phase, the knockout playoff rounds, the round of 16, and potentially the quarterfinals. But afterwards, it becomes very easy to build your ideal 50-man squad with a Wildcard Limitless or free transfers. But let's start off with the 2 goalkeepers. There are no surprises about who they're going to be, but who should we start between the sticks for the Champions League final? Yann Sommer's been a brilliant goalkeeper over the years for Switzerland, Borussia Mönchengladbach, Bayern Munich, and now Inter Milan, and I think he's the standout goalkeeper. I know the alternative is Donnarumma, and he's a solid choice, but Sommer has 11 more points and no clean sheet since matchday 11, but he can still get multiple saves, win player of the match as he did in the previous round against Barcelona. In a 4-4 thriller, a goalkeeper gets the player of the match award. That goes to show how good Sommer was, and that was a high quality game of football between 2 great teams. And Inter Milan have also been fairly solid recently, with 4 wins out of the last 5 matches, but so have Paris Saint-Germain, and their recent form in general has been identical. Even if you look over the last 10 games, both teams have actually lost 3 matches, and Inter Milan was so close to winning Serie A once more, but Napoli pipped them to the title by 1 point. And Yann Sommer's been kind of a mainstay in that team. He had that small spell out with injury and Joseph Martinez came in, but there will be no concerns here. Yann Sommer and Donnarumma will start the Champions League final, and it's all about which team you prioritize. If you think Paris Saint-Germain will win, then I'd recommend starting Donnarumma, but you can also do it in such a way where you start Yann Sommer and then go for a back 4, maybe a back 3, but you go for a lot of Paris Saint-Germain players there, like Hakimi, Bacho, and also Nuno Mendes, and it's all about how you structure things for the Champions League final, and I think you should base it off your predictions. I've currently got my own one, which I'll talk about in my deadline stream using that game Predict 6, but I think Yann Sommer is the slightly better option for this final, even if you back Paris Saint-Germain to win the game. But now, let's move on to the defenders, and that's where things get a little bit more interesting. You've got a bit more choice, I think, from Inter Milan and Paris Saint-Germain, and both of them boast so many great options in this position. There is a good reason why Hakimi is the highest scoring defender in UCL Fantasy, and only Rafinha scored more points in this game throughout the entire season. I think he is a mainstay, and you should definitely go for Hakimi, who used to play for Inter Milan. There's a bit of a storyline going on there, and as a wing-back, he scores crucial goals like he did against Arsenal in the second leg of the Champions League semi-finals, and he's also a man of big moments. He does have some deficiencies defensively, but in UCL Fantasy, he can still get ball recoveries and a lot of goals or assists, even from outside the box. When you're looking at the goals, you get an extra point for that metric, and I think he's definitely one of those essential players for the Champions League final. I'd also issue that same kind of statement to the second highest scoring defender in this game, and that's going to be Nuno Mendes on the other flank for Paris Saint-Germain. Even if you're backing Inter Milan to win 1-0 or keep a clean sheet, I still think Nuno Mendes and Hakimi are worth including in your 15-man squad, and I'd also start them in virtually most scenarios. I'd also suggest William Baccio, who gets so many ball recoveries, and he has been fantastic this season for the Parisians and a mainstay in that defence. In terms of ball recoveries themselves, he has over 100 for the season, and that's going to be the standout of any player left in this competition. 113 for him, 106 for Marquinhos, and there's a big gap between those two and third place Nuno Mendes with 81, at least in that defender position. So going for these three is something I'd highly recommend to everybody watching, but you don't necessarily need to start all three of them. You might want to bench Baccio and instead focus on those Inter Milan defenders, and one of them could be Bastoni. One of my biggest dilemmas I'll face in my team selection is whether I buy Baccio or Bastoni and then start them for that Champions League final. I'm very inclined to go for a back four this time out, and if my memory serves correctly, I actually played a back five in the Champions League final last season, and I tripled up on Real Madrid defensively, and that worked very well. The likes of Mats Hummels, for example, were very good for ball recoveries at the time, so that's why I went for that sort of pick from Borussia Dortmund. But for this Champions League final, I think it's much more balanced, and I don't have a clear favourite like I did last season, so that's why there's more of a balance this time out, with 8 players from one team and 7 from the other, and you might want to go the opposite direction instead of what I'm going to do here, but I think Bastoni is still one of the best picks in this position. Now, I'd still start this one defender who was the hero in the Champions League semi-finals across both legs, registering multiple goal contributions, even more so than Nuno Mendes and Hakimi, and that's going to be Denzel Dumfries, who took the world by storm with that brace in the first leg in Spain, and that really set the tone, I think, for the whole tie in general. And Inter Milan were very surprising in terms of their defence was actually quite shaky, but they were still getting the goals, especially at crucial moments, and it was literally a game of momentum where Inter Milan would take the lead, go 2-0 up, Barcelona would come back, but Inter Milan ended up going through just about. It was an absolute thriller of a match, one of the best semi-finals we've seen in ages, and Denzel Dumfries was a key part of it. Now, it was a slight regret of mine and a missed opportunity to not go for Denzel Dumfries in the first leg, but he was an injury doubt at the time, and I also had other transfers to prioritise. But I was asked in that deadline stream, which Inter Milan defender would you rank as the best option? And I was very affirmative about it. I said Denzel Dumfries first, then Bastoni in second, and my opinion hasn't changed after the semi-finals. In fact, what we saw from Dumfries has reinforced my belief that he's the best UCL Fantasy defender from Inter Milan, and now I'm more convinced about that, and he can actually rival the likes of Hakimi and Nuno Mendes as the very best choice in this position. The highest scoring midfielder left in the Champions League is Ousmane Dembele with 87 points, and he's got the most goals of any player in 2025. Playing as the false nine for Paris Saint-Germain, he has become a mainstay in that starting lineup, and it feels like such a long time ago that he was left out against Arsenal in the Champions League phase due to disciplinary issues, and I think he's one of the best captaincy options on paper for this Champions League final. But we have seen over the years we can get these surprise assets and also those players who just get the winner, like Kingsley Coman against Paris Saint-Germain a few years ago, when everybody goes for the other options, the more popular choices, and also the likes of Lewandowski at the time who was scoring all the goals. We could see something similar here, where instead of Dembele, you see Barcola come off the bench and score the winner, or maybe it's going to be another PSG midfielder. Perhaps for Inter Milan, it could be Barella, or somebody completely left field like Mkhitaryan. So bear that in mind. I would encourage you to go differential, and if you have a good feeling about a certain player, back your gut, because you never know how you can be rewarded in UCL Fantasy as a result. But I think that is always the kind of play for a Champions League final, and I would still recommend a second PSG midfielder at the very least, and Kvaratskhelia is my favourite personally, but you could also see Barcola start the Champions League final, especially over Doué. That could be one of the doubts in terms of how Luis Enrique will line up, and I'll also cover how Inter Milan and Paris Saint-Germain will start for that Champions League final with both teams going in that deadline stream. But Kvaratskhelia and Dembele are my favourite PSG midfielders, and I think the Frenchman is a resounding first. He is by far the best option in that PSG team, especially in the midfield. I would also go for a third PSG midfielder here, and Vitinha is my favourite. He has 73 points, only 14 behind Dembele, and also slightly clear of Joao Neves, who is a ball recovery machine. I also think he's a decent UCL Fantasy asset with Barcola, I like him as a player, but he has been quite wasteful with his finishing at crucial moments, and he also doesn't start as much as he did in the first half of the campaign. I think Doué and Kvaratskhelia have kind of nailed themselves in that starting 11, but we could still see some slight rotation there for Matchday 17. But these three midfielders are my favourites from Paris Saint-Germain, and Dembele, like I said before, is easily the one you would probably want to have. He is almost essential, so to speak, and he has the best chance of scoring in the Champions League final based on the odds, which I'll show you in the deadline stream and also in the upcoming team selection video in a couple of days' time. But let's now go to the Inter Milan midfielders, and Calhanoglu is my favourite. He is the penalty taker, so that already gives him a great chance of getting points and also player of the match awards. And I also think he can score from outside the box. He's got a lot of different avenues to getting a decent return. He can rack up a few ball recoveries, get assists from open play and set pieces. So I think Calhanoglu is the best Inter Milan midfielder in UCL Fantasy, but arguably the best midfielder overall is Barella. He is my choice for that fifth option, but you're also missing out on Mkhitaryan and a few other midfielders here and there, especially from Paris Saint-Germain like Fabian Ruiz, who scored a great goal in Matchday 16. So you are sport for choice almost in this midfield position, and I think the players you leave out, that's oddly enough what could cost you or maybe seem like a missed opportunity, especially those differentials who have that high ceiling. But I think in a Champions League final, which tends to be very cagey, you don't know which way it's going to go. It can lead you to going for the kind of safer picks and the template, which is what this midfield might seem like, to be fair, for a lot of people. But if you actually look at it, the likes of Vitinha only have 11% ownership at the time of this recording. João Neves has 4% ownership. You might be very interested in him. And Fabian Ruiz, only 1% ownership. That sort of thing does intrigue me. And if you are chasing, maybe you're not particularly happy with your rank, or you want to kind of reach your mini league rival who's first in your mini league, you might want to go for that sort of low owned player to make the difference. And that's why you might want to think outside the box a little bit, and perhaps instead of going for Bacho in this defensive line, you can go for another Inter Milan defender, only go for a back three, start Hakimi, Nuno Mendes and Donnarumma if you're backing them to win, and then go for that sort of fourth PSG midfielder, and that could be another differential in your favour. But it's all about the structure, and you have to basically set from the out-go, how do I want to go about this? Do I want to go all in on Inter Milan or on PSG? Maybe go for a balance and cover the best assets, and that's what I'm kind of doing with this team at the moment. But there are so many different ways to play it still, despite only having two clubs available for this Champions League final. Let's conclude this with the three forwards, and unfortunately, you are not sport for choice in this position. You only have 3 strikers to choose from, and all of them will feature in this best team. Another revelation from Paris Saint-Germain this season has been Doué, who has so much potential. He has scored some crucial goals in this Champions League campaign, and in the recent 3-0 win over Reims in the Coupe de France final, it was Barcola scoring in that particular occasion, but I still think Doué is more likely to start for Matchday 17, and I think he's a very good player to have in that forward line. But I'm also considering the possibility of starting another midfielder or defender instead and dropping Doué to the bench. That's something that's crossing my mind right now, but it is still quite risky because he has a decent chance of scoring. He'd be right up there in the odds for goal scorers, and I think he's got a decent eye for goal. He's got a little bit about him, and he can be a difference maker for that Champions League final. The same goes for Lautaro Martinez, who is probably the best forward left on paper in the competition with 71 points, and he also made a big difference in the second leg of the Champions League semi-finals. I know it was a 4-4 thriller, but Inter Milan had that kind of commanding lead at the beginning of the game, and Lautaro Martinez was pivotal. And I also think Thuram, who scored a very early goal in the first leg, he's another one who can also score at a very consistent rate. He's also a bit underrated, I think, and I think having Lautaro Martinez and Thuram available is crucial for Inter Milan, because when you look at the other options like Taremi and Arnautovic, their level has dropped significantly this season, and both of them could be on the way out. So I think they need to have Lautaro Martinez and Thuram fit and available. And at this moment in time, it looks very positive for both clubs with no suspensions and also fully fit squads. That's what the reports indicate, because the likes of Lautaro Martinez, Pavard and Fratesi did have some injury issues recently, but all of them should be in training over the next couple of days, and that means they will be available and should be able to start that Champions League final. And that means we can have basically both teams going fully at it at full strength, and that's exactly what we want to see for Matchday 17. So after building the best UCL Fantasy squad, it's all about the starting 11 and the captaincy because I've highlighted the best players in each position and also differentials to consider like João Neves and Fabian Ruiz in the midfield with less than 5% ownership. So I'd go for Sommer in goal, a back four of Hakimi, Nuno Mendes, Bacho and Dumfries, a midfield four of Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, Vitinha and Çalhanoğlu. And there is a slight concern here because I think you could easily start Doué over Vitinha, for example. He's got a better chance of scoring in that Champions League final. But conversely, João Neves and also Vitinha can get more ball recoveries. And in the case of the Portuguese maestro, I think he can also get Player of the Match awards very easily. And up front, I would go for Lautaro Martinez and Thuram. But in a couple of days' time, when I go live for that deadline stream on Saturday, I will look at the lineups and make a final decision and lock in my prediction. And based off that, I could make several tweaks. So for example, if I feel Inter Milan will win 1-0, then I'll probably add Bastoni to that starting 11, drop William Bacho, and maybe go for another Inter Milan defender like Benjamin Pavard if he starts, and then drop someone like Vitinha and Doué from that starting 11 basically. But on the bench, I would have Doué, Barella, Bastoni, and Donnarumma at this moment in time. And my current captain is Ousmane Dembele. So I'm slightly favouring PSG at the moment, but not by much. But from a fantasy perspective, I think PSG have the better options in general. Now, you have to start 3 players from the other team regardless, even if you go all in on a certain club and start 8 of their players for the Champions League final. So from PSG, the 3 players you definitely want to start no matter what are Dembele, Hakimi, and Nuno Mendes. And from Inter Milan, as I mentioned before, it would be Lautaro Martinez, Dumfries, and then probably Sommer as the third option. But you could easily make that somebody else like Bastoni or perhaps even Çalhanoğlu in the midfield. I think that's probably how you want to go about it. The 3 outfield players, I think, from Inter Milan would have to be Çalhanoğlu, Lautaro Martinez, and Denzel Dumfries. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Who are you looking to captain for Matchday 17? Which differentials do you think are worth including for that Champions League final? And are you going all in on Inter Milan, Paris Saint-Germain, or having a balance from both teams? That concludes the best team for Matchday 17 in UCL Fantasy. So this will be the final edition of this season, and I recently concluded the FPL coverage. So for UCL Fantasy, still have a little bit more to look forward to. The team selection is coming your way, and that's where I have 5 free transfers. I'll be aiming to match those on the Wildcard or Limitless with the starting 11. And on Saturday, I'll be answering all your questions, covering team news, injury updates, the lineups, and also the best captaincy options, and finalizing some details so we can win our mini leagues and also rise up the rankings in the best way possible. Check out the links in the description below for my X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM. You can also join the Discord server, UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify. There is my Patreon and the Championships if you want early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. Let's try to get this video in particular to over 100 likes, and also subscribe to the channel and help us reach new goals in the future, like 45 subscribers. That's our big aim by the end of the calendar year. And if you want to see Club World Cup fantasy content, let me know down in the comment section below. Make your feelings be known, and also show support to the channel by sharing and all that good stuff. I'll see you on Saturday for the final deadline stream of this season. Let's wrap up this campaign in style.